Hi everyone. My background is in design, and I'm now an environmental consultant, so a little bit of a switch. But it's put me in quite a good position to understand what design needs from a legislative point of view. And I think it's the sort of the missing piece of the puzzle that hasn't really been talked about until just now when Richard did, where we've got design, we've got the mechanisms in place to improve design, we've got innovative products, we've got great recycling processes, but still there's the issue that we're not really creating a circular economy in a way that we would really want to. So what is standing in the way of that? And I'm going to talk a little bit about that. So without wanting to go over what's already been said before, a little brief bit about why it matters. So there's been an increase in incineration over landfill over the past decade or so, and that's been driven largely by legislation. We don't want things in landfill, we don't want to bury them. But unfortunately, with plastic, burying them is actually probably better in terms of greenhouse gas emissions, because if you're burning it, you're producing greenhouse gas emissions, other emissions, you're producing a little bit of energy, but overall, it's generally not a good thing to want to burn plastics. But that's the way legislation has driven us towards. There's also increased concern of impacts on the marine environment. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second, but certainly, you know, we've heard a lot more about plastic microbeads in cosmetic products, fibres from textiles, all sorts of things. Increasing concern about resource scarcity. We've heard a little bit about that already, so don't need to talk about that too much. And an increased focus on resource efficiency and reduction in climate change. So these are the things driving this agenda forward. So just a couple of stats on the marine environment litter side. I've been working quite a lot on this area, so it's quite an interesting subject for me. So earlier this year, we calculated that there were 1 million tonnes of microplastics released into the environment globally every year. Now, a microplastic is 5 millimetre or less, and we believe that at least 1 million, way more, we reckon, actually, because it's really quite hard to quantify this. So these are little particles that a fish can just eat right up, and that's what we think is going in every year. So that's about 7 trillion particles, and which is the equivalent of about 77 billion plastic bottles every year thrown into the ocean. And that's just the microplastics, not even the larger stuff. So that's the equivalent of around about just over what the US produce in plastic bottles every year. And they use a lot of plastic bottles. I think it's a couple hundred per person. So what can we do about that from a legislative point of view? There are lots of things you can do, but one of the main things, which I'm going to talk about now, is EPR, Extended Producer Responsibility, which was a little bit about what was sort of segued onto from the last one. So the broad terminology for this is producers are responsible for the cost of managing their products once they become waste. And the idea of that is you're moving the burden of the cost of end-of-life management from the taxpayer, so that your taxpayer is paying for the municipalities to collect the waste, over to the consumer, the producer. So if you consume more, you pay more for your product, and you end up having the burden of that end of life. So the idea behind that is you consume more, you pay more, polluter pays. And the basic concept that we want to try and move towards is internalizing externalities. It's a bit of a mouthful, but essentially what that means is the external things such as environmental impacts, greenhouse gas emissions, the market doesn't account for that. All it does is account for what can we sell at what price, but to hell with the environment. So how do we legislate to bring this cost into the cost of the product, at least to a certain extent? So in the UK and in the rest of Europe, there are EPR systems around. At the moment, and this is for packaging specifically, that covers 10% of the net system costs of bringing plastic packaging, should I say, into disposal. So that's without the cost of That's without the net benefit of selling the plastic on. So we're only getting 10%. And if you see there, the UK are actually quite far behind the rest of Europe in this instance. The reason why we're only getting 10% is because we're only charging a very small amount for each bit of plastic packaging that's been recycled. So some of the other countries which have got much higher recycling rates also have much higher fees. So there is a reasonable correlation between the fee paid and the amount of recycling rate in an individual country. There's a lot more things at play, but there's a broad correlation there. So there should be a value there, but you can probably guess what that is relative to that. So this is total waste average per person over European cities. And this is the product waste. So the difference here is mostly organic, so we're not so interested in that. So 311 kilograms per person per year in European cities is product waste. So this is waste that we can capture, reuse, recycle, do whatever we want with. At the moment, only 140 kilograms is covered by EPR schemes, 40% or so. And then only another 56 kilograms is actually collected separately under those schemes. So you're looking at around about 12% in Europe is actually collected under these schemes. So that's where we are at the moment. Why aren't these schemes working? Why is this incentive not really working as well as we'd like it to? I'm going to talk about the business case for making these a little bit better. So at the moment, the best companies, the ones doing all the innovations, the ones doing practicing circular economy at its best, they're paying 10% in the UK like everyone else. Same as the worst ones, the ones who don't care, the ones who like to pollute. Everyone is on the same level. No one's getting any incentive to improve. Well, what if we move to full cost coverage? So we increase the amount of money everyone pays so that the cost coverage, so full cost coverage is covering the full cost of the disposal of your product. But again, both the best and the worst are paying exactly the same amount. No incentive for one or the other. Because it's based on weight, your incentive is only going to be to reduce lightweighting, reduce the amount of material in the product. And that's good to a certain extent, but it also can lead to sort of poor quality of materials, reduction in wall thicknesses, longevity is reduced. So what would we rather be seeing? So a better way to go about this is to look at environmental indicators for the EPR. So your best company, who's doing a lot of work in the area, they actually pay a lower fee. So this has the result of giving the best companies a little bit of a competitive advantage.